Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Reuse Company webinars. My name is Cecilia, and I will be hosting today's webinar. We have with us Christer Fröling, and he will tell us how we can increase customer satisfaction through improved requirements understanding. The webinar will start in a moment. You will be muted during the webinar, but if you have any questions or comments, you can use the chat box. But please add your comments to the user, the Reuse Company, and not to the presenter. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat box or send a mail to support@reusecompany.com. The webinar will be recorded, and in a few days, we will send you the link to the recording. Okay, first of all, we will start with a description of the Reuse Company. We are a worldwide company. We have partners in France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and Japan, and customers in the US, Europe, and Asia. Our headquarters is in Madrid, but we also have offices in London and Stockholm. Here you can also see some companies that are users of our system. They are from the aerospace industry, defense, automotive, railway, and energy, among others. We provide tools and solutions for knowledge, traceability, reuse, and quality management. We do that by using semantic analysis technologies, and these technologies have been used in a wide range of industries. We haven't yet found any industry that couldn't make use of our tools. Our focus is on reuse, traceability, and quality, and we integrate the tools and technology we have with the way that you do your work. We provide the data that allow you to present your quality analysis. We allow you to develop your knowledge bases so that you can most accurately assess the quality of your specifications. Our mission is to reuse knowledge within any organization. Knowledge is probably the most valuable asset of any company, and we can offer processes, methods, tools, and services. Our technologies are innovative, artificial intelligence-based, and we are having a lot of success helping people improve the quality of their documentation. Now let me introduce you to the presenter. Christer has been working in the medical and defense sectors in industrial organization and as a business entrepreneur for more than 20 years. Currently, he is the CEO of the Reuse Company Scandinavia and is specialized in requirement quality services and tools. Christer is a driven change facilitator and has successfully adopted and implemented international process frameworks and standards within industry. He has in recent years specialized in organizational learning, change management, process improvements, lean and systems engineering, and requirements engineering. The requirements definition and formulation of the requirements engineering connected to the concept of understanding has been of special interest. So let's start then with a webinar on increased customer satisfaction through increased requirements understanding. We hope that this topic will be of your interest.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for that presentation. And as you heard, I've been working with requirements and requirements processes for a long time, and it has been for the last, you could say, 3 or 4 years that I have come to an understanding that the requirements facilitate so much knowledge in the form of information that we need to be better in how we formulate our requirements. And I will tweak this a little bit around the concept of customer satisfaction. So let's dig in. First of all, customer satisfaction per se is a commonly used term when we talk about our customers. And we often say that we need to have a high degree of customer satisfaction, and we say that, well, the customer wasn't satisfied. And what do we really mean by that? Well, the term itself is frequently used within marketing, so it's basically a marketing term, but it's on how to measure how your products and services, which you are supplying to your customer, really meets, or as it says in Wikipedia, surpass the customer expectations. From my point of view, I'm glad if I meet the requirements, but that's a personal tweak. And why am I talking about customer satisfaction? Yeah, when it comes to using requirements, it's of course of very valuable interest that we actually can see that we have met some kind of need. And it's not that hard to go to the next phrase, which I would like to present to you, which is quite interlinked with this and quite similar, and that's the concept of quality. Because if we compare customer satisfaction as it was defined or is defined, you could see that the concept of quality is really the same thing. The meaning is that you need to have a total view on the feature and characteristics of your system or a service, of course, that bear its ability to satisfy stated or implied needs. And perhaps this implied needs statement here can be compared to surpassing the customer's expectations. But as a requirements engineer, I'm very happy if I managed to capture all the requirements and then being able to express them in a good way. And I will in this presentation not show you any tools, basically. I will talk very much about the concepts on the requirements quality and why it's so important to focus more on requirements quality that we have been doing today, I would say. And if we loses the sight on quality, we of course will get unhappy customers, and they will be this hidden cost, you could say, where we actually have these unhappy customers, which we are losing in loyalty, and we don't really see that many times that they are unhappy. So really, if we work with requirements and we see that the requirements are the driver for in this instance the need and therefore the system quality, you could say that the result of poor quality is waste. And the current estimate is that about 3 to 5% of the total work within the company is estimated to be waste, and that's a lot when it comes to the bottom line. And when we talk about the requirements as the driver, it's really to what I would like to share with you with this picture is that the communication part of the requirements themselves are often neglected, I would say. And if we use the requirements to pass on information from one stakeholder to the next, how can we be sure that we have correct, consistent, and complete information? And as you can see in this picture, where we can end up is actually kind of a guessing game, where one person or stakeholder or group of stakeholders tells something to the next and the next and the next. And how can we then be sure that the result is really what we want? And many times this shared information is over a vast majority of people or a vast group of people, and often they don't share the same language. They can be dispersed all over the world. There might be new companies working with old companies, so they don't share the history. They perhaps don't share the same vocabulary. And of course, if they are from different parts of the world, they don't share the same culture. So if we then think that the requirements per se can be misleading, many times it's vitally important to understand the information value of the requirements themselves. And when we continue with the notion that requirements are holder of pieces of information, they are supposed to not to be written by ourselves for ourselves, but they are written or formulated by ourselves for somebody else. So what are the components of human understanding? Yeah. What I say, or for what I think after been working with the requirements or the information content in the requirements for some time now, is that you have to see it as a sender and a receiver of information. And if you have a customer as a sender of the information, and you as marketing, for this instance, is the receiver of the information, it's very vital that you have the complete understanding of the customer need in this case. Because if you remember the previous picture, what happens after you have tried to understand your customer need is that you change place. So suddenly you become the sender of the information, and the receiver in this case is your colleagues within the development teams. And you have to pass on the correct information from your customer to the developers of the system or the software. And this is also regardless of the development practice in place, and it doesn't matter really if you are working with traditional waterfall models or if you are going for more agile, lean and scrum methodologies. It's just about the timing of your process, and you still have senders and receivers, and you still need to express yourself so that the receiver of the information have the understanding on what is the purpose and meaning of what you are saying. And from a more theoretical point of view, and also to link to the concept we at the Reuse company are describing as completeness, consistency, correctness, if you look at the sender and the receiver you have in this picture, there are a lot of things that you have to bear in mind to be able to say that you have captured the correct information. And is the information really correct if it's incomplete and inconsistent? I would say no. And also, if you look at this picture and you think about it, you cannot blame the receiver for having not all the information. Or if you have sent inconsistent information, the car shall be blue, and somewhere else in another part of your specification you are stating that the vehicle shall have the color of red. Of course, this is inconsistent and it becomes incorrect. And I meet a lot of organizations and companies saying that they are good at requirements. They really manage the requirements, and I'm really focusing on the word managed, because if you are good at requirements management, you are really only position yourself in some part of this picture. And the information content and what you are having in your requirements database is so much bigger than the requirements and the traceability between the requirements themselves. So if I continue, I continue with this statement, and I really mean that you will absolutely not get what you think you ask for. You get what the receiver perceives that you are actually saying, and the picture they have in their mind is absolutely correct until you have the notion on that they have not understood you correctly. So it's always the receiver of the information who has the rule of saying who is stating the correct thing. And to do a short brain test with you, this is a webinar and we cannot communicate that well. It's quite a single line of communication. But the brain, our brains themselves are really marvelous tools, but they can also play us a trick. If I were to show you a piece of information like this one, you might see that even if it's just a bunch of letters in a random order, you are starting to hook up your brain on your English side, and you are starting to interpret the information here. Even if it's completely wrong, you can say that, for example, it doesn't matter in what order letters in the word appears, so on and so forth. You can actually interpret this information. The same goes for this type of test. If I were to send you this SMS as a result, what will you get? If I send you this SMS, when you're at the store, get 2 liters of milk. If they have sheep eggs, take 4. If not, skip it. My wife usually says that this is actually how I communicate, but that's another story. But the result, what will you get from the store? Yeah, you might think that they have milk. So you will buy 2 liters of milk and you will buy a couple of eggs. Okay, then that's fine. That's fine. But now we didn't say how many eggs. So it's absolutely right to come home with 4 packs of eggs and not 4, because what's right and wrong you don't know. And if the eggs are really used for something else, just to check if the milk, if they are cheap or not, and how much milk you are going to buy, you might end up having to buy just 2 liters of milk, or perhaps also 4, because the eggs were actually cheap. Okay, and if you are going down that route when it comes to understanding, you will also be able to come home with absolutely nothing, because the eggs were not cheap. And what is really cheap? But that's another issue. So out of this, you can come up with 4 or 5 or even more different interpretations of one single sentence, which might be one single requirement. And what is happening? Yeah, our brains are, as I said, are really clever in filling in gaps. They are making conclusions. They are deleting stuff which the brain think is irrelevant. Generalize things which I think is obvious for everything. And my history and my background is really distorting the information per se, and I'm absolutely very quick at driving conclusions from the information I see. Many times it's right, but it can also be wrong. And for me, I'm not an English speaker. Well, I speak English, but I'm Swedish generally. Of course, language can be a barrier, and the culture that goes with it. And the notion today is, how do we tackle the information content in the requirement? Yeah, we usually do something which is called a review. Okay, this is just an example of a requirement specification I found, and if I'm supposed to review this, I often are sent a bunch of papers, 29 pages in this case. And they say that, well, can you read this and give me feedback? Okay. And there are really some common mistakes which are really done when you are thinking that you can review requirements as you are reviewing a white paper or a design document. Both from the content or from the notion that it's quite early in the process, and how can you build up a picture, what is complete, what is supposed to be here, how can I read between the lines, which means that the feedback often are centered around typos. I will find misspelling things, and as I said before, if I'm starting to find misspelled words and bad grammar, my brain is absolutely calibrated to find just that, nothing else. And if you have been participating in review meetings, I don't know how often it has happened to you, but it has happened to me many times that the reviewer themselves, they are not prepared. but actually reviewing the material on the meeting itself. And the people on the meetings, are they the right people or just the people that you regularly invite? And often also what I found from reviews is that people actually don't say that much because they have not been prepared, they don't know what to comment, and don't want to be embarrassed, so they actually say nothing many times or don't give you any feedback. And you have to bear in mind that keeping silent is not accepting the material. It's absolutely not meaning anything. So regular review meetings of this kind is quite invaluable. I wouldn't say useless, but quite invaluable. And how can you make sure that your customer requirements are meeting your standards or meeting whoever standards? And if you are using also sub-suppliers, how can you make sure that the sub-suppliers are along with this? You know the notion on different languages, different cultures, different history, different backgrounds. So wouldn't it be very good if you could, in an objective way, look at the work products and see if they might be inconsistency, incompleteness, and if their requirements themselves are correct when it comes to semantics and syntax. And the quality of peer reviews, if you're Googling online and see what people think, is people don't really like review meetings. Okay, they are not, well, first of all, they're not the most fun thing you can do, but when it turns out to be unjust and frequently insulting because you feel that I'm writing these requirements, you shouldn't come here and tell me what to write and things like that, or that you actually think that the grammar, the fixing typographic things are the only thing you should do, you are wrong, and your organization needs to have a better help in doing this review in a good way. And if you're not being able to do all these things I've been talking to you about, I'm starting to talk about what I call the death spiral. And from my point of view, it's really like this. So if you have stakeholders, they are like customers. They are very often not very precise on what they need. They need something fast, or it should be cheap, or it should have good quality, and it should be easy to use, or whatever they might say. And it's really our task to interpret this into a set of complete, consistent, and correct requirements. If we fail doing so, they will inevitably be developed into a crappy system that either do the right thing but solving the wrong problem, or just being plain wrong. And of course, you will find that the verification of your system will be quite hard, because when it's time for testing and verifying your requirements, then it's the time, and it's very late, to actually have the notion of what is the meaning of your requirement. So you have your system saying something and your requirement saying something else. And you end up having a system which is not accepted by the initial stakeholders. And there are a lot of material which we could present to you showing just this, that so many times the requirements process is not working. And when we come to the concept of requirements and requirements quality, what is this really? Okay. There are many papers out there saying that requirements, and in this case requirements development and requirements management, is on the third place on the most important things you can actually do within a project to be successful and be effective. What does it mean? Well, from my point of view, the requirements and the requirements engineering process itself can be divided into both being able to manage your requirements, which is, from my instance, the governance side. You need to have a proper structure of the requirements. You need to have traceability to requirements and test. You need to be able to manage change over time. That's fine. But if you stop there, what are you actually managing? If you're managing not very good requirements, even if you have good traces, what does it really mean? Because if your requirements are incorrect, incomplete, and inconsistent, it doesn't really matter how you trace them. So what I'm saying is that you need two sides of this coin. You really need both the management of the requirements over time, and you need to have them properly formulated so that the information content in them are of highest value. And that's basically the area where we at the reuse company are talking about today, even if we are also managing the traceability parts in some sense. So when it comes to requirements, the requirements development portion of this is of vital importance. And as you see here, I'm also drawing out 4 boxes, which means that you need to have a process in place so that, of course, it's not of very proper use if I'm very good at writing requirements, but I'm writing good requirements, but about the wrong things. So you need to have them aligned with your system engineering process, which means that you need to be able to elicitate, do analysis of the need, being able to formalize both the requirements and then put them into a specification in order to support your verification and validation efforts. And of course, both the requirements development portion and the requirements management side need to support the notion on reviews, because you need to involve people in this loop to get proper understanding, to get actual proper feedback, and so on and so forth. And our notion with what we call correct, complete, and consistent is to work with the requirements early in the process, which means that from day one, really, when we start to formulate those requirements, that we make sure that we are verifying the requirements but against a set of rules, and that we can validate all the inconsistency in the requirements to our stakeholders in an early phase, because before we start to build prototypes or the first release of something, we should focus on the requirements. And if you have heard about this SMART notion, that the requirements should be smart, they should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and traceable, you have to bear in mind that this acronym is really from people trying to explain how you are supposed to write good goals for projects or organization. Because traceable is really time-bound from start. So it's not traceable, but we have been using this as kind of acronym for what to focus on when it comes to requirements. But the notion of completeness, consistency, and correctness is the way to go. It's the future, because then you start to focus on the information content and the quality of the information. And when it comes to the quality side of the requirements, there are a set of characteristics what stipulates a good requirements from many different standardization bodies and organizations. And since we are part of the organization called INCOSE, for those who don't know about INCOSE, it stands for International Councils on Systems Engineering. We have been part of developing the Guide to Write Requirements, where we also talk about correct, complete, consistent. And of course, this guide needs to be tailored to your need, because it includes almost 50 different characteristics of good requirements or a set of requirements. But at the end of the day, you need to have some measures on what is a good individual requirements and what is a good set of requirements. And we are talking about these 3 C's. And when it comes to correctness for a requirement, you have to make sure that the actual requirement is within the scope, and that you don't have any conflicts with other requirements. And if you have fact in the requirements, like you remember the four in the egg situation, you must be able to state that the requirements, the fact itself is true and correct. So it should be four eggs and not 4 packs of eggs. And a complete individual requirement should include all the information that the reader needs to fully understand the information in it. So you're focusing on the receiver of the requirement. You're not focusing on yourself. There are different readers or receivers of the requirements, and they have slightly different needs. So some information you put in the requirement statement, and some will go in some additional attributes, but we will spare that for another session, I think. And for a set of requirements, of course, when you have a bunch of requirements, pages long of requirements, you need to be able to make sure that you are describing all the desired capabilities. You have to make sure that you, in this instance, in the process, are as complete as possible according to where you are in your design process. And you shouldn't miss any links when we are talking about requirements management. That's not a very good thing. And of course, all the different viewpoints need to be considered, so that you can actually start to have a feeling for what is the quality requirements for your system. And consistency can be divided into, of course, that you need to be able to see that you are using the same vocabulary, you're using the same writing style. I very often see in documents, review them, that I can see that they are 2 or 3 different authors of the requirements, having completely different shapes and forms of their requirements, and they are using different vocabulary. And of course, that's not very good when it comes to understanding. So you may end up having contradicting requirements because you can't really see when you review the requirements what is the meaning of them. And if you can't review the requirements in a proper way, you start to miss that you have redundancies, for instance. And inconsistent measurement units are, of course, also a bad thing. So am I saying that the quality of requirements equals the quality of the system? No, not really. Okay, but if you're using processes like ISO 25010, you can have a feeling for what are the quality characteristics you need to describe for your system. But you have to apply system engineering so that you apply the right requirements. You are describing the right things, not randomly just picking things. So system engineering goes hand in hand with this, and the requirements engineering is part of systems engineering. But if you write low quality requirements, you can't really expect to have high quality of your system, can you? And don't forget that there are a lot of people involved in this, and if all you guys involved in one project have different views on what the meaning is of your requirement statements, don't expect to have an easy journey. And from our perspective, as Cecilia said, we are part of the artificial intelligence schema when it comes to using natural language processing, reasoning, and some machine learning when it comes to requirements. What I'm meaning then is that we are using semantics, syntax, and pragmatism, which is a fancy word of having the right structure of your information, to make sure that you are correct, complete, and consistent. And the more you walk up this hill, the more intelligent your requirements will become. And you will be more and more able to talk about using and reusing knowledge, not only data and information. So you should focus on this. And we have had other seminars talking about how to integrate this notion into your organization, and I will not mention this so much but you should start with a common vocabulary, for instance, the semantics. That's the starting point. And our tools are reusing this schema and this thinking when we are helping organizations to increase their information quality in their requirements. And the notion about this is built around the knowledge manager idea, where we are talking about vocabulary, conceptual models, patterns, formalization, and reasoning. And I will briefly go through this because I see that the clock is ticking here. The first thing you need to do is that you need, as I said, you need to control your vocabulary. A controlled vocabulary is the starting point of all good understanding. If you are not sure on what vocabulary you are using, you will probably mean different things. You need to start to control your vocabulary. And you do that in the knowledge manager, where you store your thesaurus with all the information which are nouns, adjectives, synonyms, and so on and so forth. After that, you could fill up with conceptual models, and the wordings in your thesaurus themselves will form part of conceptual models, but you could also include other sets of information, like if you have different types of diagrams or SysML models and things, you should absolutely tap into those and reuse those, because they are valuable assets when it comes to creating a knowledge base. So that's what we do. We either create it in a knowledge manager, or we tap into the sources of the information themselves within the organization. Like a design organization have SysML models. When we've done that, we add the patterns, which make it possible for us both to analyze and measure things, but also to aid in the requirements formulation process. We have a lot of videos on internet if you are interested in seeing how you are using patterns for writing requirements. But basically, you have a structured way on which order your syntax are working and what are the wordings you are supposed to reuse. And when you have your patterns, we will formalize those into our own language, you could say, within our system, which is called system representation language. And we are doing that for all kinds of information, not only sentences with a controlled syntax, but also diagrams, models, and things like that. So we can actually start to compare requirements written in English with a SysML model stating a state chart or something like that. Are they compatible? Are they complete? Or are they inconsistent? And that's what you actually are doing in the reasoning phase, where you can start to look for inconsistency, start of seeing, are we incomplete? Are we missing something? Which is pretty much impossible when it comes to reviewing stuff, because you are not looking for something which are not there. You are looking for things that are there. So we can help you seeing that things are probably missing. So short, what you should do is that you should start to look into your information as knowledge assets, and you should start to create what we call a knowledge base. You should add your acronyms and definitions, which you already have in your organization. You should reuse well-known and well-proven structures, document structures, information structures, models. You should create patterns for helping you both analyzing how good the information is, but also to help you state proper requirements. And you should use the Incosa guide, for instance. There are other guides, but the Incosa guide for what are the quality attributes for your requirements. What are you looking for and what you want to avoid? And when you do this, alongside with our products, you will have an easier journey to go from stakeholder needs, which the requirements will hopefully capture if you're doing some proper system engineering, And they will state those needs in a very good way, and the design will fulfill those requirements, and the test will confirm it, and of course, at the end of the day, then the system will satisfy those customer needs. And by that, I would say that you are closing the loop, and you could start to say that you have a high quality in your product, and hopefully, therefore, you will have a high degree of customer satisfaction. So by saying that, hopefully, my friends, if this was the first time you saw or heard about this notion on requirements, there is really, as I say, when I compare myself to Matrix, there's no reason to look back. Now you know how this is working, and now we could see, now we could think about what you want to do to increase your requirements quality. And that was my last picture, so I'm returning the share to Cecilia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christer. If anyone has comments or questions, you can send them through the chat box to the Reused company. Next webinar will be the 2nd and 4th of April. It's called Automatic Traceability Discovery for Systems Engineering. Traceability is a core activity within the system development lifecycle, although a tedious and time-consuming task. With Traceability Studio, you will discover how traceability issues can be reduced by controlling the quality of the traces. Furthermore, help users to do traceability tasks by suggesting automatic traces based on their organization and system knowledge. As I said, this will be the 2nd and 4th of April. Then we also have another upcoming event. It's our user summit in Madrid, and this will be the 27th and the 28th of March. Okay, questions and answers. We have some questions. Let's see, this was an interesting presentation. You said that reviews of requirements are bad. Are you meaning that one should skip human reviews altogether?
Thank you, Cecilia. No, I hope I didn't say that requirements reviews are bad per se, but as they are conducted today, they are not very effective. I think that you should use tools like the reuse tools to actually get rid of a lot of syntax and semantic bad things and pass on feedback to the reviewers that these are things that you need. They are vague, and you need to discuss those. So I actually use the tools myself as a review help, you could say, to have a good checklist on what issues and what topics you need to discuss on as part of the review. So you, as Carl Wagen said, you're removing a lot of things beforehand. So no, you shouldn't skip human reviews, but you need to be better at them.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Great presentation. Will it be available to download? Yes. We will send a link to you in a couple of days. Another question. Let's see. Quantitative targets, fundamental but too tight. They kill the design. Too loose. They do not drive the value. Does it make sense?
The question itself was quite short, but I'm not saying that the requirements process should be so strict that you are not accepting innovation, for instance, or accepting that you need to be able to have a degree of freedom for your designers, but you should have so complete and so correct requirements at that point in time so you can manage risk. And in our tools, for instance, you have different quality baselines for different time slots, you could say, in your process. So you could start off very easy with some easy things, and you can end up checking a lot of things. So you add the quality characteristics on the requirements during the development cycle. So I hope that answered that question.
Okay, thank you. Have someone measured if a CCC technique increased customer satisfaction?
I was almost waiting for that one. No. But what we can measure is by using techniques like Massachusetts Technology Institute, MIT, their COSISMO model, where one of the key metrics there or drivers are requirements understanding. Just by working with that metric, we can see that we can save a lot of effort, roughly around 15-20% in a regular project is just by increasing requirements understanding. But if that at the end of the day make the customer more happy, I wouldn't know. Hopefully we will sell a better product which is aligned with the customer expectation, which hopefully make the customer happy. But we haven't measured directly, no.
Mm-hmm. Is it hard to implement this technique?
How long is a string? It takes some time. It does. We usually perform a POC in 4 to 6 weeks when we look at the current status of the requirements. We look at what are the information sources, how could we start to build a thesaurus, common vocabulary, set up some basic rules, and that takes basically 4 to 6 weeks. And you have then, you could say, started your journey. This is something you need to focus on exactly the same way as you focus on system modeling techniques or requirements management. So yeah, it takes some time, but it's so worth the effort, I would say.
Okay. Thank you very much, Christer, and thank you to all the participants. Let's see. If you have any further questions or want to have more information, don't hesitate to contact us by email to contact@reusecompany.com or by our website, reusecompany.com. Thank you for your attention, and see you on our next webinars.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.